Hello and welcome to the Just Interesting podcast with me, Robin, and my good friend Alex. Hello, Alex. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Robin. I'm happy that it's just the two of us this week. Well, no, I'm not happy that we're missing Martin.
I'm terribly sad that it's just the two of us.
After the last thing that he said to us, though,
that's true.
I don't miss him. He was yelling something about "stop the steal," and
lock her up.
Talking about gun control, and he was getting on a plane basically to the US. And I said, Martin, no, your parole officer said you can't leave the country, and he just ignored me and blanked me and got on the plane. So
typical Martin. Yeah. It's a slippery slope, isn't it? Once you start streaking, it's just you just never know where you're going to end up.
Exactly. But Robin, how are you doing? How are you this fine Monday evening?
I am well, thank you. Although it's exciting times in America across the pond because tomorrow is the midterm. So we're recording this live. Those of you listen to us on a podcast platform of your choice at a later date or watching us on YouTube at a later date. We are live on the eve of the midterm elections 2022. And these midterm elections, for once, may actually live up to the hype that usually surrounds all kind of elections, in that they are possibly the most important elections of a lifetime, if not in a nation's history, in terms of the potential significance they will have for the future history of the American people, or in at least the United States of America. So we thought we'd discuss, for Alex, you made this great suggestion to discuss this potentially terrifying development that we could be witnessing the end of democracy as we know it, if not democracy full stop, in the United States of America.
And I figured there's nothing that anyone would rather listen to than two British guys who aren't even there talk about US politics.
Yeah.
Our politics are perfectly normal here. So
perfectly normal.
we can just look at the US politics instead and speculate wildly on that.
Well, this is where we may have the only kind of grain of legitimacy that we have in terms of talking about this is the fact that we're one of the oldest democracies still going in the world. Obviously, democracy started in ancient Greece, but that democracy in Athens didn't last all too long. And the British democracy in its current form is, I believe, the longest continuous democracy in the world. But obviously, our democracy has its flaws. And particularly from America, you look at Britain and you think, that's not a true democracy. So from Britain, we look at America, and we've looked at America for generations, I think, as the kind of bastion of what a functioning democracy, a fair and balanced democracy should look like. Obviously, it's got its flaws and it's had some terribly dark periods, but by and large, it's a much better democracy than ours might be in principle, in construction, right?
That's why isn't that part of the reason why they left us?
Yeah,
why they abandoned us?
Yeah,
why they wrote up a whole constitution, a Bill of Rights. They had everything, Robin. They had it all written on parchment paper. And it was going to be great.
So we thought it'd be interesting to look at what's happening in America from the perspective of a country that, up until recently, and including recently, has a deeply flawed democracy, but actually one that may be functioning weirdly better than the American one is about to, depending on what happens tomorrow. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of that very deep topic, we will, of course, be addressing your comments, and we will be revealing things that we learned this week, and I will be asking you to solve a riddle.
Oh, and it's just me this week, so pressure's on.
Except, Alex, you are not alone because you're joined by the chat. Of course, the lovely live chat that we have on YouTube. And we have quite a gang with us today. We've got Recu97, Andras Winiger, Cat Jab, Hey Now Paulie, Archaic Arts. Sorry, I couldn't read that. Randy Scribner, Ninja Morty, Camera Shy Coco, hey, AMB, and Funky Monkey 1235. Thank you all for joining us live, and of course, welcome to everybody else who joins us live. And if you want to join us live and you're not able to for this episode, please tune in Mondays, 9 p.m. GMT, whatever that time is.
Think
locally.
about that then.
I didn't. Yeah, what day is this? And please do feel free to join us live. And if not, then thank you so much for listening to us on whatever platform you've chosen to listen to us on. And, but before we get on to anything else, I shall read the riddle. This week's riddle, which I may reveal the answer to at the end of this episode, depending on how while I remember to do this. Alex, are you ready? The
I was
riddle?
born ready, Robin. Hit me.
Of course you were. I run, but I never walk. I have a bed, but I never sleep. What am I?
I run, but I never walk. I have a bed, but I never sleep.
Exactly, you remembered it. So, yeah, think about that one whilst we talk about
Okay.
other issues that are completely not distracting.
I'll have a think about it. I mean, there are some comments already, and that was my go-to thought. I don't want to say it to ruin this for
You're looking at the
later
comments.
listeners.
Well,
But,
I can say, or with authority, that no one in the comments has necessarily got it right yet.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm glad I can cross that one off my list and start thinking about some other things.
But also, several people in the comments may have it right. So, I haven't looked at the comments yet. What do they say?
Oh, that's absolutely meaningless then. I can write nothing off.
The key word is necessarily.
Oh my gosh. Okay, fine, whatever.
Okay. Well, Alex, what have you learned this week?
Not the answer to that riddle, unfortunately. But hopefully I can learn that a bit later on at the end of the episode. This week, Robin, I've learned something that kind of might pertain to what we're discussing today.
Oh, really?
And it's a statistic about Americans that is a bit worrying, and a bit troubling, and kind of a bit sad, really. But a man named Carl Pillemer, the Hazel E. Reed Professor in the College of Human Ecology, Department of Human Development, has released a book called Fault Lines, Fractured Families and How to Mend Them.
Okay.
And he conducted a large-scale national survey and basically found that 27% of Americans aged 18 and older had cut off contact with a family member.
Really?
Yeah, and that seemed like it's a crazy high percentage.
That's really high, yeah.
And they also say that this could be an underestimate as well, since many people are very reluctant to discuss this issue.
Of course, yeah.
But 27% conservative estimates that someone has cut off a family member. I mean, do you think that is something particular with the US, or do you think that is would carry across to the UK as well and other nations?
I mean, that's the scale of that statistic, 27% is shocking. I wouldn't have guessed.
Yeah.
I would never have guessed it was that high. But it's a cliche in a lot of old novels, the patriarch has cut off the inheritance to his son or whatever because he's a bad boy. We don't speak to him. So that kind of stuff comes from life, right? So it's a thing that happens. And I know people who are in a similar situation actually over here. So I hoped the people I know are unusual. But now that you've said that statistic, I'm wondering if, maybe it is as widespread. Nearly a third of the population anywhere cuts off ties to a family member. I mean, just to play devil's advocate.
Okay.
It can be justified.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that.
When you look
absolutely.
just look at prison, like I can understand why family members might cut off contact with that serial rapist or murderer,
I always hated the argument that, blood is thicker than water or whatever. Oh, you got to stick by family.
Yeah,
not if they're a dick.
Yeah. I think a recent political family in America demonstrated that really there are times when you definitely can abandon your family. Someone who'll be mentioned, I think, in today's podcast a few times, probably.
But I mean, that's part of the reason why I brought this fact of the week up, because I figured, I wonder how much politics plays into this as a factor. How many people do you think get ostracized from their family just because, for the only reason that they hold a different political view? I'd be interested to get that statistic.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to share it, feel free, but please do not feel obliged to share it. But if anyone watching us or listening to us, please in the live chat now or in the comments below on YouTube after today, or on our Twitter at JInterestingYT, or I'm at AllTimeRobin.
Oh, and I'm at Just Alexing.
Nice. Please feel free to share if you want to. If you've had a similar experience with family members or people whether it's you yourself, cutting off communication, and why that is and why you think that might be. Because I've had political disagreements with members of my family, but we haven't stopped talking to each other. But at the same time, there are people I know who are friends who I would like to cut off for their political views, but don't. So, I know.
Fair enough. But that's what I learned this week, Robin.
That was pretty grim.
What did you learn this week?
Well, I feel like I should have asked you to go second because that would have been a nice segue into our main topic. However, I learned.
You didn't, did you?
I didn't. I thought I was interested to know what you'd learned. I learned through casual conversation with someone yesterday, actually. Wonderful facts that people produce out of nowhere. Hawaiian pizza. Do you like pineapple on your pizza, Alex?
I mean, I don't want the comments to judge me, but I do, yeah.
Okay.
I like it.
Okay, I'm a no.
I don't have a problem with it. There are dozens of us, Robin. There are dozens.
It's fine. You're allowed to like it. It's fine. I have the excuse of being vegetarian, so ham and pineapple, I've got a way out. But as it happens, I never liked it anyway. Pineapple on pizza, what are you thinking about? Anyway, I learned that Hawaiian pizza was created in Canada in 1962. By a Greek restaurant owner called called Sam Panopoulos, who owned a restaurant in Ontario with his family. He went on a holiday to Naples and thought, hey, this pizza thing's good. Because in 1962, Alex, they didn't have pizza in Canada.
Wow.
It wasn't a thing. Pizza came to the Americas in the 1960s. So he went back to Canada with this pizza, thought, I'll put pizza on the menu, and then decided, I'll spice it up because everyone's doing mushrooms on pizza, cheese and tomato, pepperoni, whatever. I'll do something else. And he just got a can of pineapple rings and put them on with ham on his pizza. And the brand of the can of pineapples was called Hawaiian.
Well, there you go.
And that's why it's a Hawaiian pizza, because the brand of the pineapples he used in a can was Hawaiian. Hawaii had become a state in 1959, so I guess there was kind of a Hawaiian craze going on, and it caught on.
We were born too late to explore the world, born too early to explore the galaxy, but born just at the right time for Hawaiian pizza.
We were indeed. It's funny, because we're both obviously born much more recently than 1962. I just can't imagine a world without pizza. It's been such a dominant part of pop culture, the diet.
Yeah. Not
just that I love pizza, but you're like watching all those movies. I was like, let's get a pizza. Growing up, pizza is a thing. Home Alone.
It also it's one of those things that seems like quite a simple idea. You'd think that it would be incredibly old and may not have just originated in one place, but like loads of places would have their own spin on it type thing. It was learning that sandwiches weren't actually that old. And for hundreds of years, people just had bread, a hunk of bread, a chunk of cheese,
on
and
the
a chunk
side
of ham on the side. And then I just imagined the way that it worked was the scene in 2001: A Space Odyssey when the was hitting the using a stick as a club with someone's just putting meat between two slices of bread.
I mean, I would love to know, because it's named after the Earl of Sandwich, isn't it? Who apparently invented it on his hunting trips or something. And just imagine that.
I heard a different story. I heard it was. I heard it was because they were a big gambler.
Right.
A way that they could hold their food.
Oh.
And not get
no, you're right. Yeah.
Not get drips on all over their playing.
The playing cards. Yeah. No, you're right. I think that is the story. I misremembered it. But yeah, just imagine that it would have been a simple conversation because he orders people around. But yeah, I'd love to be there for that conversation. Just Jenkins, the butler, slice my bread in two and put the ingredients between the slices. What was the butler's reaction? Probably just yes, sir. But I'd like to think that it was a kind of come again? Slice my bread in two and put the meat between the slices. I'm sorry, sir. I'm really struggling. What are you saying?
We're just looking at the comments, and there's some interesting pizza toppings going on here.
Oh, really?
Recu97 says reindeer is great on pizza.
Oh my gosh.
You wouldn't want to have that around Christmas time, would you? That would be a bit traumatic.
I'm guessing reindeer meat rather than just a reindeer standing on your pizza.
I would assume so, Robin. Yeah. Yes, I would assume so. Andras says, we have curry and banana in Sweden. I don't know if that's a type of
On your pizza?
I don't know if that's on pizza or if that's just you're saying you've got curry and banana in Sweden. You're just flexing over there. We got curry. We got bananas in Sweden.
Curry pizza is a thing I've come across recently. I've never tried it, but it's an option that's appeared on menus in places I've been to recently. So that seems to be a thing that's happening now. But banana as well?
Just confirmed it's on pizza.
Is it nice, Andras? Is it nice?
Banana's a bit weird, but then I do like pineapple on pizza.
No, but pineapple is sweet and juicy, whereas banana's that really kind of flat flavour. Do you know what I mean?
I know, yeah, I do.
It's distinctive.
Not citrusy, is it?
Yeah, that's right. It's not citrusy. I see that. Hey now, Paulie says, I'm from Ontario. Not proud of that fact.
Oh.
That's a shame.
Sorry to hear that, yeah. I'd be interested to hear what everyone's takes is, what their favourite food is. Now that we're talking about food, maybe I'm just hungry, Robin. Maybe that's it.
Getting hungry.
But
Trying to cut this live stream short and order some pizza. Sorry,
it'd be great to hear what people's favourite foods are. Let's get some favourite foods comments going. That will lighten the mood as we dip into the dark world of the upcoming election.
Yeah, I know. Scary times. Well, before we get into that dark world, shall we address some comments of the week that we wanted to talk about?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I had a comment. I don't know if anyone else saw, but I made a poll during the week for who would win in a fight between the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, a Chupacabra, or, of course, Robot Robin. And I wanted to call out Big Chilling Peemp, who says, is this even a fair fight? Robot Robin's got the latest and greatest Zeta Reticuli quantum brain chip and laser eyes. So unfair. And I just say, yeah, but they all have supernatural powers. So it's like science versus the paranormal. So yeah, but you did win an overwhelming majority of votes in that poll, Robin.
Did I?
You went home with 60%. I almost got a bit suspicious. Maybe you rigged the vote.
You mean bots? No, I don't know what you're talking about, mate.
Stop the steal?
The machines were rigged. Well, thank you for creating that poll, Alex. I assume it was you. It was you, wasn't it?
It was me.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Thank you. I think I'm flattered.
Welcome.
I don't think, for the record, I don't think I would defeat Bigfoot in a fight. But the robot version of me might, I suppose. Which doesn't exist, by the way, the robot version.
Trying to pretend. Yeah, sure.
It doesn't exist. I swear.
Keep saying that.
Oh, dear. There's a comment on our last live stream, which was for Halloween, our Halloween special, where we told the real life paranormal stories that you lot, our lovely listeners, had submitted to us. Some of them were ghost stories, some of them weren't. But someone had a comment from Free Wild World said, guys, please get a mate to EQ your audio. Love you guys, by the way. So I just wanted to address that and say thanks for the feedback. Sorry for the painful audio if there's a problem there. But we actually, and especially Alex, there's a complicated setup. There are layers of audio and filters and processors going on here, along with quality microphones. And if it sounds a bit dodgy, it's not for lack of trying to equalize it. There is so much processing going on. Yeah.
Absolutely nothing wrong with this feedback. It's a work in progress, and I wish I was better at it.
No. You're excellent, Alex. You're excellent at it.
Oh, thank you.
And at the sound stuff too.
as well.
Wait. Well, I just plug it in and trust the technology.
Yeah.
But
okay, cool.
but speaking of this great equipment, we couldn't keep this podcast going or elevate it to the level that we've managed to elevate it to without the lovely, wonderful support of our Patreons and YouTube members. And I just want to say direct thanks to some of you lovely, lovely people, such as Caleb Wilkerson, Kurt Jones, Nemo, Janie, Nicholas Dill, John Baker, Hey Hey Swanboat, Jarax Nida, The Super Show podcast. Great podcast. Check him out. If you're into video games, you'll love it. Henny Ruffle, Ahmad, A Filthy Casual, Peaswad, Simon Workman, Josh Chomatek, and of course, Emmett Tapia and the one and only Sir Chris McCrate. So thank you, all of you, and everyone who we haven't named tonight, everyone who supports us on Patreon and YouTube, thank you so much for joining us and for keeping us going. And of course, thank you to all of our lovely listeners for tuning in, and especially to the live chat who are with us. And please do feel free to contribute to this discussion, because we don't have a quiz tonight. So if this discussion goes on a bit longer than usual, I don't have a problem with that. I don't know about you, Alex. You may have somewhere to be. But,
I do. I've got. This is already past my bedtime, Robin.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alex. I'm sorry.
No, I'm more than happy to discuss this. This normally the Patreon people will know that when you and me do a Patreon exclusive episode, Robin, about politics, it normally turns into an epic rant. So I'm excited and a little bit scared about where this is going tonight.
Yeah,
I would say though, speaking of Patreon episodes, if anyone was interested in checking out our Patreon, we've recently put a little behind the scenes clip of what we've been working on recently. This is probably a bit too soon to tell everyone, but you can kind of get a little hint of what we've been working on behind the scenes if you wanted to support us on Patreon. And I think, what are we talking about on there after this? We may be talking about the whole Elon Musk Twitter thing, but we haven't really set that in stone.
Yeah, it depends how long that rant goes on for. That might be a topic for another podcast entirely, yeah. But yeah, we talked about, we do have a kind of like an unofficial Elon watch going on over on our Patreon, a little more interesting episodes, which are available to all of our YouTube members and Patreon supporters exclusively. So we'll probably talk about Elon on Twitter again, knowing us.
It's been a pretty eventful week, I'd say.
It has indeed, it has. So yeah, if you're interested, please do support us, head over to Patreon or become a YouTube member, join us on YouTube. There's a button below, I believe. And you can hear us rant about Elon Musk in our simultaneously appalled and fascinated kind of relationship with the man. You know, it's a complex one. It's like a car crash, a human car crash. Can't look away. But shall we move on to the main topic of today's episode, Alex?
Absolutely. Oh, I just want to say, Captain James T. Pizza says, just so long as you're not doing an OnlyFans.
Not yet.
Well, I mean, where do you think Martin is this week? That whole thing I said earlier, that was just a cover-up. But
Done it again. Every time. So, is the American democracy doomed, Alex? That is the question for today's discussion. And everyone in the live chat, please do feel free to contribute your opinions. We're going to start with the fact that America is essentially a two-party system. Technically, it has independence in government, but it's just a two-horse race every single election, right? We've got the Republicans on one side and the Democrats on the other. If you're going to oversimplify it, you would say that the Republicans are the right wing and the Democrats are the left. In reality, they're both right wing. It's just that one of them is very centrist, the Democrats, and the other one is much more right. And in recent years, it does seem like the Republicans have shifted significantly towards the far right. There's long storied accounts of when that shift began. But the point is that where we are now, this time in history, as of today, on the eve of the midterm elections 2022, we have the Democratic President Joe Biden in power. We have the Democrats holding the House of Representatives, I believe, and we have a stalemate in the Senate, with the tiebreaker being the Vice President, who is, of course, a Democrat, Kamala Harris. Current projections, according to the website 538, which is probably the most reliable kind of watchdog when it comes to political results in America, because they look at political results by analyzing constituencies and seats in Congress, which is the House of Representatives and the Senate. They currently predict a slight likelihood that the Republicans will take the Senate. Very slight, 55 to 45% chance. And then an 84% chance that the Republicans will take the House of Representatives.
I think we should probably explain a tiny bit what that means to people that don't even know. Because some people might be watching this and think, I don't actually know anything about US politics. Sure. They might be like us. So it's probably worth mentioning that in America, there's basically three branches of government. Let's break it down super simple. So there's the executive office of the president. who's one pillar of the US government, and then you've got the Senate, which is made up of 100 senators, is it?
Yeah, no.
I think. And then you've got the House of Representatives, the Congress, and it's the Senate and Congress that are basically up for grabs in this midterm election.
Yeah.
And also that's probably worth mentioning that in America they have elections every 4 years, but after 2 years they have these midterm elections where a bunch of seats in the House of Representatives and the Senate go up for grabs.
Yeah, they stagger them deliberately. So it's every 4 years are the congressional elections, but they alternate every 2 years with the presidential elections, which are also every 4 years. But because they're staggered, you've got an election every 2 years, essentially. Hence, they're called the midterms because it's halfway through a presidential term.
Normally, that's kind of seen as a bit of a opinion poll of the current president, aren't they? And normally, it kind of swings the other way, I'd say, historically. So whoever is in power, like Donald Trump, in his midterm elections, the Democrats won back the House. And Obama, the same thing happened. In his first term, he lost the House to the Republicans, I believe. And then during his second term, in 2014, those midterm elections, the Democrats lost both the House and the Senate.
Yeah.
And that was hugely consequential because what it meant was he was essentially, you don't like to describe him like it, but he was a bit of a lame duck for the last 2 years because he couldn't really get anything passed without the other two branches of government.
And that's a really important point to remember when we have this discussion, and why we're fearful for the fate of democracy in America is because American politics has become so polarized in this two-party system over the last couple of decades that the intention by having these staggered elections, that Congress potentially being controlled by the opposition to the presidential party, in theory, everyone should work together. So it's a check and balance. It's a way of stopping the president from overstepping the mark because you've got the opposition parties in power in Congress who can say, work with us so that your agenda doesn't take the country in the wrong direction. That's the theory. But in practice, politics has become so polarized in America. Well, let's focus on America. So I'll just say in America. That
yeah,
that
not exclusively.
Not exclusively.
Other countries are available.
But as you saw with Obama, especially, the Republicans have abused that position to stop any agenda at all from taking place, and loads of potential progress. I don't just mean in terms of political bias. I mean just any progress at all, just progress on anything being done. Just running the country in any way that's beneficial for the future was stopped by the Republicans when Obama was in his second term to make him look bad so that he would then lose the next election. And the same will happen now. And the Democrats, to be fair, tried their best when they did well in the midterms in 2018 against Trump. They tried to stymie him in their own way. The difference is that certain things have taken place that we'll be discussing that mean the Republicans have had a much stronger hold over Congress, particularly the Senate, but also the House of Representatives, in the last few decades than the Democrats have. And it's not reflective of voting patterns in America, which is why you've got the situation where just in this century alone, in the last 22 years, you've had 2 Republican presidents, George W. Bush and Donald Trump, both of whom were elected to their first terms in office, losing the popular vote, which has never happened to a Democrat.
Yeah.
But has happened to these 2 Republican presidents in the space of 22 years. In fact, in the space of 16 years, because it was 2000 and 2016. They've lost the popular vote, but they've won the presidency because of Americans' system. And in particular, because of the stranglehold that the Republicans have developed over voting districts. And the reason they've done that is because over the last few decades, particularly under the leadership of certain individuals, let's name them Senator McConnell, have gerrymandered voting districts so successfully that they've rigged it in favor of Republicans on a state level and on a congressional level. Now, it's not impossible, of course it's not impossible for Democrats to win seats because they've done it, and it's not impossible for Democrats to gerrymander as well. They do it. In fact, right now I think there's a case being heard in the courts for New York, or it was just resolved actually, where the Democrats in New York redrew the voting districts to the claim was that it favored them over the Republicans, and the claim was successful in the courts, and the Democrats' drawing of the districts was overruled. And they're going
gerrymandering is just something so outrageous to me. That I don't know what it is about gerrymandering, but the whole very idea
despicable.
of it
Yeah.
ticks like the wrong part of my brain. It's so wrong. For I guess a brief mention of what it is for those who may not know what it is. It's essentially redrawing the districts based on whether they're registered Republicans or Democrats. So basically, if there's an area that's 40% Republican, 60% Democrat, you could split that area up in certain ways to make it so it's just like in 3 out of, if you split it into 5, you could make it so 3 out of the 5 areas had the majority Republicans, and then suddenly the whole area is Republican. Even though, and I've said that, I've used Republicans as an example, but I mean, it could be the other way as well.
Yeah.
But
it happens.
It's so wrong.
It's statistically proven, and this is an undeniable fact, that Republicans have gerrymandered more than the Democrats in history. And that's partly just a result of the success of the gerrymander. So Republicans in certain states have maintained power for so long that the Democrats aren't in the position of authority to redraw the districts, because the districts are redrawn pretty much every 10 years when the new census results are released. And the theory is they're redrawn to reflect the changing demographies of America. So in theory, it's a good idea because you're always keeping pace with the changing demographics of the country. But in practice, it allows for gerrymandering. And up to this point, the only recourse that anybody has to challenge gerrymandering is to go through the courts, to mount a legal challenge. That's not always possible because you need the resources to do it. Sometimes there are political decisions made by judges. But for the most part, it's just, it is successful. Like I just said with New York, the Republicans successfully challenged the Democratic gerrymandering of the districts in New York. However, right now, the Supreme Court this month is going to be hearing a case filed by Republicans in Ohio to appeal against a decision by the Ohio, or the appeals court, to overturn the gerrymandering of districts in Ohio. The Democrats successfully sued against their redrawing of the district lines. But the argument they're making to the Supreme Court is that a theory that's called independent state legislature, which is arguing that the courts do not have the right to tell politicians how to draw district lines. So basically, they're saying the judiciary, that third branch of the American system that Alex was describing earlier, does not have legal oversight for drawing of electoral districts. So if the Supreme Court finds in their favor, and there's a strong suspicion that they will, we don't know if they will, but there's a strong suspicion that they will, because it's a Supreme Court that's been packed by Republican presidents, and it's a highly conservative court at the moment. If they find in their favor, then it will establish the legal principle, the precedent, that the courts no longer can overrule, I should say, the gerrymandering, essentially, by state legislatures. And the problem, of course, is that at the moment, at the point we're in history right now, the gerrymandering heavily favors the Republicans across the United States of America right now, which feeds into this problem of, is it a democracy when you've got a two-party system and one party is guaranteeing itself the majority of seats at every level of government, from the local level up to the federal presidential level? So that's
But Robin,
yes.
if all the Democrats turned up to actually vote, like if everyone turned up, then gerrymandering flips, doesn't it? It goes the other way. Like it could be disastrous for the Republicans if there was huge, massive turnout. But I mean, we've had this. Gerrymandering's been a thing for decades. We've said it already.
Yeah.
We're titling this, "Is US Democracy Doomed?" And Bush, in the comments I saw, said Bill Maher had a good point, a good video about this recently. And that's actually kind of what inspired me to suggest this discussion, is that video. Where it's kind of very defeatist about the current state of the US politics. What's different this time? What are we talking about that's different this time in this midterm election? And why could this be so consequential?
Well, now that we've laid the groundwork, Alex, thank you for teeing me up nicely to introduce the real issue.
Welcome.
So currently, 291 of the candidates put forward by the Republican Party for this election have explicitly questioned or denied the results of the 2020 presidential election in which Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump.
That's mad. That's wild.
Yeah. And these people are saying that Joe Biden didn't win. He stole the election through a giant conspiracy with all the Democrats from Donald Trump, which is not only untrue, and we won't waste time explaining why it's not true, but it's just not true. It's factually untrue. And there's loads of actual legal cases which prove it's true. Sorry, it's not true, I mean.
You've just been cancelled from YouTube,
man.
Robin.
Oh, no, I know. And...
or they're going to promote us more. I haven't decided. I don't know.
Yeah, let's test the Alex Jones theory, sorry. So these people are saying that these people are saying that Donald Trump won the election in 2020 and it was stolen from him by the Democrats. And they're already claiming that if they lose this election, the midterms, the election will have been stolen from them, which is incidentally also what Donald Trump did in the run-up to the 2020 election. The implication, and in some candidates' cases, the explicit statement they're making, is that if Democrats win an election, it's been rigged, it's been stolen. If Republicans win, it's not been stolen. Does that sound like a healthy democratic approach to you? Does that sound like any other countries in the world that we know about?
You can't have a healthy democracy unless both sides, respect the facts, the outcome of the results. If one side doesn't believe in the rules, then how can that work? That doesn't work.
No. It's just a terrible starting point. But when you combine that with the gerrymandering that's taking place, which is essentially stealing votes because you're making null and void your opponent's votes by clustering them together to contain the number of seats they can win, or by spreading them so far apart that they can never get a majority in any district. You're just legitimizing your own stealing of the election through gerrymandering. And we've got some candidates. You mentioned this, Alex, before we started recording.
Tim Michaels of Wisconsin is a Republican candidate, and he was quoted last week or this week saying basically, if he wins the election, then Republicans will never lose in the state of Wisconsin, which is a terrifying thing to say. Yeah, it's basically saying that they will make it so Republicans never lose that state, which is a swing state.
Yeah, exactly. So it's hugely important for every presidential election. And even if you want to defend him and say, oh, what he meant was he'd be so good at the job that people would never vote Democrat again, the man's not going to live forever. So when you say that there will never be Democrats in power in Wisconsin after he wins, that's not really, he's not saying I'm going to be so good that people will love me. He's saying I'm going to make it so that they can never win. Yeah. There's only one logical way to interpret that statement. And in 48 out of 50 of the states, there are election deniers, these people who claim that the election in 2020 was stolen from the Republicans. And in total, over half of all the Republican candidates are election deniers. And of those 291 people who have publicly stated, we don't know about the ones who, what they privately think, the ones who haven't publicly stated, they could also be election deniers, they just haven't said it. But of the 291 who've publicly stated that they believe the 2020 election was stolen, according to the Cook Political Report and the Partisan Voter Index, 171 of them are favoured to win in their districts. 48 of them are in close races and could win. And only 72 of them are not favoured to win.
Yeah.
So over 200 candidates' seats could be won by people who believe the 2020 election was stolen from the Republicans. And if Democrats win an election, it's not legitimate.
Can you imagine extrapolating that, if that does happen, 2024 rolls around, Biden versus Trump 2.0. Imagine if the Democrats win that election. Is that going to be honoured? Is that going to be respected? Because as Bill Maher said in his piece, January 2025 at that point rolls around. Trump is turning up at the inauguration, but this time he's going to have hundreds and hundreds of people that are willing to let him through the gates, basically.
Yeah. That's the thing, because even if you think that these people are saying it because they want to win support and they don't actually mean what they say, then why would you assume they're actually going to act honestly when it comes to the actual event? If Trump were to attempt to steal the 2024 election, if he ran and if he lost and if he turned up anyway to be inaugurated, claiming that he'd won, why would you assume any of these people who are saying the last election was stolen would actually suddenly change their tune? We've got to assume that all of them are going to go along with it. And even the ones who aren't saying anything, like Senator McConnell, who leads the Senate, Republicans, and has done for decades, he never explicitly said the last election was stolen, but he's not tried to shut up the people who say it was stolen, and he's never tried to work with the Democrats, and he's constantly trying to stymie them. In fact, there is a lawsuit named after him, a Supreme Court case from the early noughties, where it's McConnell versus the FEC, I think, the Federal Election Commission, where he started the process of eroding the bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, which established the limits on campaign spending and established that all donors to political campaigns must be named.
Yeah.
And that was a bipartisan bill. McCain was the Republican who put that together. And McConnell's name is on the lawsuit that started the process of eroding that act, which was only passed in 2002, and already it's out the window. And in fact, this year, these midterms will have had the most spending out of any election in American history, even adjusted for inflation. $9.3 billion, I think, dollars is going to have been spent by the end of it. Yeah. And disturbingly, I've got the stats here, actually. As of October the 27th, so just over a week ago, $1.6 billion have been spent on TV ads for Senate candidates.
1.6 billion?
Yeah, on TV ads. $1 billion of that was from the GOP.
Yeah.
From outside sources. And what that means is outside sources are private donors who aren't acting directly on behalf of any given political campaign. So it's not campaign finances and it's not donations to campaigns. So these aren't ordinary donors. These are people with lots of money, or corporations or organizations with lots of money, and therefore lots of vested interest. Not ordinary people who give their money to the candidate. These are $1 billion worth of private, mostly unknown donors who are buying TV ads. And 86% of GOP funding for TV ads comes from these outside sources, some of which is what they call dark money, which is completely opaque, unknown private donors. We just don't know who's giving this money.
It's absolutely mental.
Yeah, 86% for the GOP, and if you're wondering, it's only 55% for the Democrats. So the Democrats benefit from it too, but it's 55% for the Democrats comes from outside sources, wealthy donors who may be corporations, maybe charities, maybe individuals, but 86% for the GOP. So you've got to ask yourself the question, just statistically, in whose interests is one of the parties in America acting?
Well, I mean, maybe it's a good time to bring up the fact that this is a breaking news story just a few hours ago.
Yeah.
The Russian businessman known as Putin's chef, Yevgeny Prigozhin? I can't remember. I can't pronounce his name.
Okay.
He's admitted that they interfered, the Russians interfered in US elections, saying, "Gentlemen, we interfered, we are interfering, and we will interfere."
Oh my gosh.
Accurately, precisely, surgically, and the way we do it, the way we know how to.
Yeah.
I mean, as straightforward as you can get.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can think of one or two politicians in recent years that have had nothing but good things to say about Putin.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like,
not on the Democrat side.
it's. I'm sorry to say this to anyone who is of the belief that the Russia thing was a hoax. It's incontrovertible. The Russians intervened in the 2016 election and probably in the 2020 election too to benefit Donald Trump and the Republican Party. It's highly likely that Donald Trump was unaware of this, and it's possible even that everyone in the GOP was completely unaware of this. But there's no denying that the Russians intervened on their behalf. And you've got to ask yourself the question, if the Russians, the enemies of America, are intervening on behalf of the Republican Party, and the Republican Party is overwhelmingly getting a lot of its campaign financing from secret, wealthy donors, or in some cases what they call dark money. Do you really think one party is acting on behalf of the American people? And coincidentally, it's that same party that has won 2 presidential elections without winning the popular vote, and is the party that is statistically most guilty of gerrymandering electoral districts, and is the same party that is hinting very heavily and putting up hundreds of candidates who say, by implication at the very least, if the other party wins, it was fraud. If we win, if I win, it wasn't.
Yeah.
America is a 2-party system where one of the parties can no longer be described as being democratic. And the clue's in the name. One of these parties has democracy in its name.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and, is there any way back at this point that America is in, do you think? Because at the moment, I hate to be like defeatist and a downer and cynical about this, but I don't know what the future holds. And it is across the pond, it's a bit scary looking at America, because this does affect us as well. I mean, this affects the whole world.
That's another good point. Tactics, for example, the Republicans have already announced that if they win the House, they will then dominate the committee that controls the budget, the debt ceiling. And they've said already explicitly, they said they will use the debt ceiling. In other words, they will refuse to approve raising the debt ceiling for the government budget as a political weapon to defund a lot of state-funded programs, which help the poorest and the most vulnerable people. And that's not democratic. They've done it in the past already. Like you said, I'm going to keep saying his name, Senator McConnell. Mitch McConnell has led this movement of using the debt ceiling as a weapon to shut down the government because of all the silly rules they've got in place. By the way, everyone, America is the only major democracy in the world that has this rule about the debt ceiling. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And if they don't let up on that, if they follow through with not raising the debt ceiling and using it as a political weapon, what would be the fallout from that? What happens then? Is that a government shutdown, or is that...
the government shuts down until the debt ceiling is approved. Or is raised, sorry. Because you can't approve the budget without agreeing the debt ceiling. So without a budget, you can't fund the government in any federal government services. And America's experienced this several times in the last decade, I think. And then if you don't raise the debt ceiling by a certain deadline, America technically defaults on its debts. And then if America defaults on its debts, America basically is the global financial system. Without Wall Street, the global financial system can't stand on its own 2 feet. We trade in the dollar. The world trades in the dollar. And right now, the dollar's been gaining strength in the last few months, thanks to Joe Biden's policies. So actually, all other countries in the world have been devaluing because the dollar's been gaining strength. In fact, the strongest it's been in history.
Including ours, yeah.
Yeah. So if the dollar suddenly crashes, which it would if America defaulted on its debts, it's not just a global recession. It's like, I don't even know what you describe it as, because it goes beyond depression, because it's like the financial system collapses.
Meltdown?
Yeah.
What's worse than a depression? Financial suicide.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, dark. So this is why we take such interest, I guess, from across the pond looking at America, because not only do we admire it for the way it broke from the monarchy and said, we're going to start a true democracy by the people, for the people. And yet we also lead the world. And if we collapse, then the world collapses. You know, in the comments, Jim Calhoun has just commented saying, if you're scared, imagine what we're feeling.
I mean,
yeah.
it's a good point. I mean, like, we haven't even spoken about it yet, but imagine if, despite what the polls say, imagine if the Democrats do win or maintain both houses tomorrow, the Senate and Congress. We've already seen political violence breaking out in the last few weeks. I mean, there was an attempted assassination of Nancy Pelosi. Pelosi's husband was attacked.
Yeah.
I feel like that has kind of flown under the radar, and it was kind of disgusting how that got turned into like some conspiracy theory about him being like them being gay lovers or something. I don't even want to repeat it. I mean, I just have.
Yeah.
But,
no,
like
it's disgusting, isn't it? Yeah, and it's the way the Republicans, the far right, I should say, sorry, not just the Republicans, is whoever's on the far right in America, and presumably influencers such as Russia, foreign states, have spun, using the internet, spun these stories to really weaken the opposition to the Republicans. And I'm glad you mentioned it, because I wanted to raise the point that studies have shown. Just the other week, there was a study released that showed political violence in America has risen dramatically in the last few years.
Yeah.
And of course, we saw it on January the 6th. That's the ultimate act of political violence. Some people died. They tried to storm the Capitol building and take control of government. And it wasn't a noble revolution like in 1776. It was just, we refused to accept the results of this perfectly legal and normal election process.
Yeah.
And
It did lead, however, to the funniest moment in human history, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
That election was the funniest moment in human history, which I'm speaking, of course, of the hotel, what was it? The Four Seasons Total Landscaping. How did that happen? That moment was just, we're living in a simulation. Them giving a press conference outside Four Seasons Total Landscaping.
I know.
The most American, the thick of it moment I've ever seen in my life.
I think that's what really disturbs me, is that these people are clearly cunning, but they're also really stupid.
Well, I mean, that's probably a blessing in disguise, I think.
Yeah. And I think I try, even if you divorce politics from it, if you just look objectively at the behaviors and characters of the people on both sides, and I'm talking about Britain here as well, there are, largely speaking, decent, intelligent people trying to do the right things and follow the rules on one side, and a bunch of idiots who are breaking and bending the rules as far as they can, but are also really obviously, patently idiots on the other side. And yet the idiots are the ones who are winning. And it's just so depressing. I mean, you asked, is there a way back? Sorry, were you going to...
Well, no, please carry on.
I was going to say, I at this point, I'm pessimistic like you are, and I don't think there's a way back. Except
that looks like Fox News having a total
Yeah.
stranglehold over the US
Yeah.
population.
And the rest of the media is complicit in the sense that they report on what Fox News is reporting, right? So Fox News's reach is beyond just their own viewers. But I was going to say, I think the only way out is through the Republican Party itself. You need people like Liz Cheney, who seems to be the only Republican doing the right thing and acknowledging the truth for what it is.
But
And
she's out. She's lost her primary.
well, yeah. So she's the only one. And yeah, you're right, she's been kicked out. And you need the Republicans to do the right thing. And I'm afraid in terms of the immediate effect they can have, it has to be in the midterms tomorrow. The Republicans who know right from wrong, and they exist, because I think fundamentally everybody has a sense of what is right and what is wrong, must vote for the Democrats, because America has a two-party system, sadly, and you have to vote for one or the other. And I don't see how you can, with any justification, except through blind self-interest, vote for the party that is so transparently anti-democratic right now, so authoritarian. And I don't know, you've got people like Ron DeSantis in Florida who's arresting black people who've legally voted. You've got the Wisconsin legislature that's losing the popular vote by 8% and then getting 63% of the seats in their assembly. And how is this a democracy? How does this function? How can it call itself a democracy? And you've got Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, refusing to say the election 2020 wasn't stolen, despite the fact they've got a private recording of him claiming that he told Trump to resign because the election was legitimate. And yet publicly he doesn't. And it's people like him that are the problem. And Mitch McConnell, who don't publicly do the right thing because all they're interested in is power. And we saw this happen in 1930s Germany. Sorry.
Do you foresee the next few years, if Trump does win 2024, do you think from that point on, elections will happen, but they'll be kind of like Russia and China, and they'll just kind of be for show?
Yeah, so it depends. There's one positive thing that could be said about the Republicans is that they are a bit fundamentalist when it comes to the Constitution. They actually don't uphold the Constitution as well as the Democrats do, for the record, when you actually look at the legal and logical arguments. But they talk about upholding the Constitution as it was originally written. There are more, what do they call them? Is it originalists or literalists or something? The people who want to take the Constitution as it was written by the founding fathers, not the founding fathers,
okay.
but either the...
You can't change anything. Perfectionists. Purists, I guess.
Yeah, take it as written. And often used in defense of the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. Anti-gun control lobby in particular, I like this. And in the Constitution, it says that every person has the right to vote. Yeah. It's in the Constitution. So the only way to do that would be to amend the Constitution to remove the right to vote, which they could do, but let's assume they won't. So elections will happen. But the Constitution, the election clause in the Constitution gives Congress superiority over the states. So the Constitution explicitly says that the states can determine how they conduct their elections, but Congress ultimately can override anything they do when it comes to congressional elections. So if the Republicans take control of all the states, or the majority of states, and the presidency and the Congress, and they can do what Trump already did, which is pack the judiciary with his own judges. That's interesting because quite a few of those judges have since ruled against him in key cases. He clearly didn't do a great job of picking his partisan judges, but
if you give someone an appointment for life, there's no need to be loyal after that, is there?
Well, except that's true. Except the Supreme Court seems to be.
Maybe that's they've chosen the people that are actually ideologically linked. But there are some people, who argue in favor of lifetime appointments for that very reason, that they they're not going to be really swayed by favors or gifts because they're already at the top of the ladder. They've already got their position for life, which is an interesting idea.
Yeah, but it's a flawed system. It's similar to our House of Lords.
House of Lords, yeah.
House of Lords is problematic because, on principle, I get where they're coming from. And in practice, at the moment, we're lucky that the centrists and the left-wingers outnumber the right-wingers in the House of Lords. But the House of Lords is a deeply problematic and undemocratic institution, and the Supreme Court is similar. In my opinion, anyway, of course. I'm just an observer from Britain. But speaking of that, Alex, maybe we should, as two British men looking at America, how do you feel it compares to what's happening in Britain in terms of how did the American democracy look to you?
So I feel like there's parallels in many ways, but I think that one of the defining differences is we don't really have this same election denial going on over here that they do. That seems to be not even just like a fringe prevalence in America. It seems to have almost overtaken the right wing completely.
Yeah,
like we said, 300 people could be elected tomorrow who deny the results of the 2020 election. That is just mad, like comparing it to the UK politics.
Yep.
And who is it? Someone in the chat said, how's Charles? I guess referring to Charles.
Okay.
I mean, we've got we live in a parliamentary democracy. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. With what's the name of our monarchy?
Constitutional monarchy. Yeah.
Constitutional monarchy. We've been talking about constitutions left and right.
Yeah.
My head's getting spinning.
Yeah. We haven't got a written constitution though, which just makes it more confusing.
Yeah. Someone mentioned the Magna Carta as well. I don't think you can really compare that to the US's constitution. It's more guidelines, really. But yeah, no, I think in terms of, it's a lot less nationalistic over here. I think there are creeping elements of nationalism, especially when it comes to things like Brexit. But in general, the US has got me a bit worried. When comparing the two, it doesn't look as healthy as our kind of election. I mean, look, we're not here saying Joe Biden is amazing or anything, or we're not saying that the people on the left in the UK are amazing either.
No,
but I think you have to have both parties agreeing that the process works for it to work.
Yeah.
And over here, both sides are still agreeing that the process is working.
Yeah. I think the problem we've got
we've got problems ourselves with people want proportional representation brought in when we've got we vote for a local MP to represent us in Parliament, but it's not representative. You've got 5% of the electoral population can be represented by 50 MPs. Talking about the SNP. When you have like the Green Party receiving 5% of the vote as well and being represented by one MP in Parliament. So it's not totally fair, really.
No, it's not. And you've got we've got a terrible election system. It's really unrepresentative, despite the fact our system is called a representative democracy because we elect representatives for us. But the first past the post system we use based on constituencies is, as you say, deeply unrepresentative of the people. We have similar or arguably similar gerrymandering going on, but it's much, much, much less prevalent, partly because, unlike in America, where it happens every time there's a new census every 10 years, with us, governments do it, but governments have to vote on it. So it doesn't happen that often, or as often and as badly as it could happen, because the whole of Parliament has to vote for the new constituency boundaries. So, for instance, it's been a decade in the making. There's a constituency boundary proposal which will drastically favour our Conservative Party, the right-wingers, over the Labour Party, the left-wingers. But it's been a decade in the making because it's just so hard to get it through Parliament. Because there is a committee, which thankfully is fairly honest, drawing up the lines, which have been debating it and taking their time. And then, of course, it has to go to a vote in Parliament and then goes to the House of Lords for amendments. And luckily, the system prevents it from happening in the way that happens in America.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the same time, we've got this batshit system where we're on our third prime minister in 3 months.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard you say batshit, Robin.
Sorry.
See, I told you, I said at the start of this is what happens when you get us to
Guys get all anti, yeah. And only one of them was actually elected in a general election. And even then, as you say, Alex, we never vote for our prime minister. We vote for our local MP. We never actually vote for our prime minister. We do in practice, arguably, because most people, when they vote in the general election, are thinking about who they would like to be prime minister, and that's what happened in 2019. But we never know who our prime minister is going to be, and that's exactly what we've had in the last 3 months. 3 prime ministers in 3 months, and 2 of them we had no idea they were going to be there, and they were elected on a manifesto in 2019, which they're now.
It's a totally different manifesto.
Just ignoring, yeah, and it's like.
Yeah, mad.
It's mad.
So we're not sitting over here all high and mighty on our own horse, praising our politics whilst shitting on the US politics. We've got our own problems for sure, but it's incredibly relevant at the moment, given the midterms are tomorrow. So I guess maybe it's just worth saying, go and vote.
Yeah,
if you are listening to us in the US.
I think wherever you are.
It's probably way too late for that anyway. But
might be too late to register, yeah. I mean, that's another thing, incidentally. Mail-in voting as well. The Republicans are against that across the board. They don't like it because if it gives the Democrats votes, because they know that there's a significant proportion of people who would vote for the Democrats who don't go to the polls on voting day.
Yeah.
Whereas mail-in ballots allow them to vote. And it's just, how can you... It's like that Michelin Webb sketch that we're always referring to. It's like, how can you sit there with any good conscience, vote for the party that is openly opposing giving people a way of voting?
Yeah. I mean, that's in some countries, I think Australia has this. It's mandatory to vote. Like lots of countries have it, but they kind of incentivize it. They have like hot dog stands at the poll booths and stuff. Yeah. Would you be in favor of that, bringing that in? Mandatory voting?
I think we should.
But like you can spoil. You don't have to vote for.
Yeah, you can spoil your ballot.
You can spoil your ballot.
And that's a great response because the one thing that people always, as soon as you say you should have mandatory voting, there's always someone particularly on the left, actually, I'd say more so on the left than the right, who would say, "Oh, I don't want to vote." It's like, well, you can spoil your ballot. You don't have to pick someone. You can spoil your ballot. That's a valid statement. But at least there are people who may vote if they're compelled to, who wouldn't vote otherwise because they're lazy or because their life is a mess. The poor in particular, it's proven after centuries of study, poor people have too much crap going on in their lives to remember to go to the polls on voting day a lot of the time.
I mean, and also, the day that these elections happen, they're not on a weekend or something. It's not a bank holiday.
It's always a weekday, yeah.
People have to work.
I think it's in... Australia has mandatory voting, and I think Australia also makes it a holiday. Like, no one has to go to work on a voting election day. And it's like, why can't we do that? There's no reason not to.
Yeah.
Right. So we've kind of ignored the comments. Shall we just see what are people in the chat saying? I mean, there's been a massive conversation going on. It's been fascinating to see it going on in the side.
I've been trying to catch them as they go.
Yeah. Anything juicy?
Yeah. RecU97 says British is automatically better, I guess, the political system, because at least you have more options for 7.
Oh, we do? In terms of voting, we do. We have parties.
I guess you
plural,
do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still, but the thing is, if you're in a safe area, it's kind of the same thing, right? it doesn't feel like your vote really matters. You could be in a safe Conservative seat, which is a seat like I grew up in most of my life. And it's kind of, it almost feels pointless because you can vote however you want, but your vote's not going to have as much of an impact unless you lived in a swing state, you know?
Yeah. No, I'm the same. I've never lived in a constituency where my voting choice has actually had an effect because it's been safe seats for the other party or a party. And that's another reason, incidentally, to make people vote, because a lot of people are defeatists and like, oh, I can't bother to vote. My vote doesn't matter. It's like, yeah, but if everybody voted, you never know what might happen.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got...
it's interesting.
Do people... see, there's a poll in the chat. Yeah, should we have mandatory voting? 68% of people in the chat say yes. 32% say no.
Paul Atwall in the comments says, I don't agree with mandatory voting. People should have the right not to vote. It would be interesting. I mean, I don't feel like it should be a case of if you don't vote, you get sent to jail or something, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, what would you say is the punishment in this situation with mandatory voting? What's the...
I think a fine would be the thing to do.
How much?
It's a good question.
Because how do you ensure that it's not the people that
you want to fix
are worst off and is able to get to the voting booth?
No, you're completely right. It's problematic. I actually don't know what the penalties are in Australia for not voting.
I don't like the idea in principle of forcing anyone to do anything.
Right.
But having said that, if it's such a minor thing, I don't know.
Yeah.
If it's a fine, then the rich people can just pay the fine. I don't care. Whatever.
Well, that's the thing. I was thinking a fine might be good because if the rich people don't vote, then they pay money, and presumably a rich person's vote is more likely to go to a party that I don't really like. So that's fine with me. And any money that's raised through fines for penalties for not voting goes to the government and goes to the coffers, which can only help. But you're right, there's a problem with fines because they would disproportionately affect the poorest in society. I suppose you could attach it. Someone we used to work with, Alex, in the olden days, had this idea of giving people a certain number of points. So if in the average lifetime, if you've got elections every 4 years, the average lifetime you do, say, you vote 20 times. It's probably too high, actually. It's too high. It's more like 15 times or something like that. Anyway, let's say if you voted about 20 times in your lifetime, on average, or you had 20 opportunities to vote in a general election, and you had some kind of point system that started at 20 and went down as you got older.
So you have more influence
exactly
at the start of your...
Yeah, exactly.
So the young people have more of a sway in politics.
Yes, which helps address the problem of an aging population and helps progression happen because young people are always thinking about the future. Old people are always thinking about the past. It's the state of life. But this person's suggestion was that with this point system, you only lose the points when you actually vote. So if you chose not to participate... For example, if you had the right, it wasn't mandatory voting and you chose not to vote, if you skipped 3 elections because you didn't like the people that are being put forward for election, then on that 4th election, when you did finally vote, you'd still have 20 points if you'd never voted before, And I thought that's an interesting suggestion. And I don't really know how you'd keep track of it because voting is meant to be anonymous. I suppose they do know, actually. They know who's voted, don't they? That's how they check for fraud. So they do keep a list of who's voted. They just don't know which way they voted. So actually, that would work. It would work. Yeah.
It's an interesting idea, for sure.
Yeah. Although Jamie Barrow in the comments says, the trouble with points for votes is that it's a slippery slope to a social credit system.
I mean, I generally don't like slippery slope arguments anyway, because I didn't get the connection there necessarily. Is that a social credit system?
Yeah, Jamie.
How does that slope?
Yeah,
happen?
Please elaborate, please. Yeah, what do you think that would lead to? What would be the problem that would lead to?
It's an interesting idea, though.
Are you suggesting maybe that certain voters could be targeted because the government knows they haven't voted for a while and therefore have more points.
Another thorny issue that's brought up in these kind of discussions, a controversial one. What would you think about a general kind of test before someone is allowed to vote, like a kind of just very basic political knowledge test, as in like, do you have to know who the name of the candidate that you want to vote for or something?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we have so many tests and licenses for other things, like
to make sure that someone's not just going into the booth and ticking randomly.
Yeah. It's the inherent flaw. I mean, Winston Churchill famously said, democracy is the worst form of government apart from everything else.
Yeah.
Because the problem with democracy is people. I would be more specific and say the problem with democracy is politicians, because they lie too much. And the media lies too much on their behalf. So can we trust people to make informed, educated decisions in the voting booth? I guess the answer is no.
But then if they can't, then Robin, then why are you fighting for democracy anyway?
I confess, Alex, there are many times in my life. There are many times in my life where I feel a little bit like Anakin Skywalker in Episode 2.
Oh God!
When he says, people should vote for people who make the right decisions, and she says, "Well, how do you make sure they know what the right thing to do is?" He said, "Someone should make them know." I'm like, yeah.
You have mentioned your dislike of sand before, Robin, but I thought
I do hate sand.
I thought that was just something about it getting in your circuitry.
It gets everywhere. But it's fine. I know I'm fine because I've got the high ground. So
okay, good. Oh, great. Okay, fair enough. Well, I mean, that's a bit concerning, but I'll allow it.
No, I mean, okay. I guess the one thing I didn't think about when we started this episode was how on earth do we wrap this up? Because it's the election's going to happen tomorrow. There's no real debate to be had here. Democracy is on its way out in America, and the democratic system, which
are we saying that? Are we being that definitive about it? Democracy is on its way out.
Unless by some miracle the Democrats manage to hold either the House or the Senate or both. I don't see.
But even if they do, is it the kind of the upheaval that will happen, the kind of political anger on the side of the other side that believes that it was rigged or has been primed to believe that it was rigged, the increase of political violence, is it still only a matter of time, even if the Democrats win? I guess we just pose this as the question to the audience.
Yeah, I guess so,
listeners. What do we think? You know now, if you're listening to this at a later date, you know what the results were. What do you think is going to happen next? I guess that's it.
Yeah. I mean, there's one thing we should have mentioned at the beginning as a kind of setup. Let's remember that right now, one of the parties, and the one that's likely to take power in Congress tomorrow, is the party that loaded the Supreme Court with justices who overthrew Roe v. Wade, despite the fact that polls show 80% of American people favor the right to abortion. 80% of the American population were just ignored. And I think whilst there's always that subtle argument between our leaders should lead us and our leaders should, do what we want them to do, when 80% of the population wants you to do a certain thing or thinks a certain thing is good, I think there's no argument in favor of ignoring that.
Yeah.
And that's one half of American politics right now, have that attitude. And that's what's despairing, I think.
The problem is now, Robin, we've got to end on the bleakest note I think we've ever ended one of these podcasts.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry to get
we don't even have a quiz to get us.
No, we don't. But you know what we do have? We have a riddle.
Oh, we do have a riddle.
We do have a riddle.
I've forgotten it. Say it again.
Okay, yeah. I'll read it out. I run, but I never walk. I have a bed, but I never sleep. What am I?
I run, but
Did
I
you get
never
it?
walk. I didn't get it. No.
Are you sure? Because I
Martin
feel like...
was here. I bet he'd get it. Give me a clue.
Well, I think the chat gave you a clue earlier.
So, I mean, the chat said river earlier. Is it river?
It is a river.
Oh,
Well done.
okay. I would have guessed that.
Can I give you a bonus riddle? Because I almost went with this one, except that I didn't like the wording at all.
Okay.
Okay.
Two in one podcast.
I know, it's mad, isn't it?
Living on the edge.
Absolutely mad.
Okay, let's go for it.
Uh,
So earlier on, Robin, when the chat guessed something and I said, "Oh, the chat's had a guess," and you said, "No one in the chat's got it yet."
Everyone
and that
got
was
it.
the only guess that you made.
Everyone got it, yeah.
You just straight up lied, Robin.
Oh, dear.
Oh dear. I will also shout out, I believe Martin is in the comments, by the way, commenting as just interesting.
I wondered, I thought, Alex, you're doing that very stealthily. Is that Martin? Yeah, okay.
That must be Martin.
Thanks, Martin.
Yeah.
Martin's here in spirit then. The spirit of Martin has been in the chat. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I bet he's been tearing his hair out listening to me rant about politics with my ignorance. Because Martin is by far the most politically informed, I think, of the three of
Well,
us.
I mean,
Yeah.
he's incredibly right-wing as well. Incredibly right-wing.
That's true.
He believes that we should stop the steal. And
Yeah, and I've never seen him with a black person.
oh my gosh. Gosh, Robin. No,
I
Martin
think
is,
that's objectively, that's false, actually. I have seen him. Okay, so
what's this riddle, Robin?
the second riddle. The healthier you are, the bigger I get. The bigger I get, the more I'm hated. What am I?
The healthier you are, the bigger I get.
Mm-hmm. The bigger I get, the more I'm hated.
Ego? Is it
Ooh.
ego?
Yeah, it's a way better answer than the actual answer. So the actual answer to this terrible riddle is age.
Oh. The healthier... Oh, okay, yeah.
The healthy.
Yeah.
So the what they're trying to say is that if you're healthy, you'll have a long life and your age will reach a high number. But the way that's phrased, it sounds like the more healthy you are, that's bad because a 20-year-old is healthier than an 80-year-old, right?
Yeah. I prefer my answer.
I think your answer is better, actually, yeah. But I still, it's that first bit I don't like. The bigger I get, the more I'm hated. Yeah, I think that's...
Yeah.
Anyways, that was
Jamie Barrow in the comments said self-esteem, and Bush said ego as well. So yeah, I think we can all take a win on
I think they're better. Yeah, age.
Better answers.
Yes, age was the answer, but it's not a good one. So if any of you get, exposed to that riddle in the wild, somebody tries to trick you, just say age and tell them how rubbish the riddle is. Also, just interesting, gave an interesting answer to that question, which is kind of what I thought you'd go for, Alex, the first time.
It did cross my mind.
Eggplants. Anyway, well, thank you all for listening. Thank you all so much for the comments. It's been a fantastic chat. Sorry we didn't include all your comments. You were having such a good discussion. We didn't really want to intervene and interrupt some of the comments going on. But thank you for listening. Please do share your thoughts, either in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, or if you're listening to us on a podcast platform of your choice. Contact us on Twitter at JInterestingYT, or you could give us a review if you're on a podcast platform with the ability to review us. Please give us a review, give us a rating or a ranking, and share your thoughts, and we might read it out in a future podcast.
Absolutely.
And stay tuned for more goodies in the future. We'll probably see you, or you'll hear us, at the same time next week.
Absolutely. Mondays, 9 p.m. GMT. See you there.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.